Are you often overwhelmed by emotions when stress hits? Do you find yourself making rash decisions in moments of pressure? How can you think more clearly under stress, especially when everything inside you is screaming to act on impulse? Welcome to this video on how to think critically under stress using Stoic principles. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with more content that will help you improve yourself daily. Now, let's explore 5 powerful Stoic techniques that can transform your ability to stay calm, think critically, and make better decisions in challenging situations. 1. Recognizing your emotions, the first step to clarity. Have you ever reacted in the heat of the moment, said something sharp, made a rash decision, or allowed anger or anxiety to push you into action, only to look back and wonder, what was I thinking? If so, you're not alone. Most people found themselves swept up in emotional storms. It's part of being human, but that doesn't mean we have to stay at the mercy of those emotions. One of the foundational principles of Stoicism is emotional awareness. Not just feeling emotions, but understanding them. The Stoics didn't believe in suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. Instead, they taught that by identifying and examining our feelings, we could loosen their grip on us. This process, simple in concept but powerful in practice, is the first step to gaining clarity and living more deliberately. Why emotions need a name? Emotions, especially intense ones like anger, fear, jealousy, or even excitement, can overwhelm us. They have the potential to hijack our reason and push us toward impulsive behavior. But something interesting happens when we pause and simply name what we're feeling. Psychologists today call this effect labeling, and it's backed by science. Studies have shown that naming an emotion engages parts of the brain associated with higher reasoning and self-control. In short, when we put words to our emotions, we start to gain control over them. This aligns perfectly with the Stoic idea of becoming the master of your inner life. When you say to yourself, I'm feeling anxious right now, or that comment made me feel disrespected, you create a moment of space between the emotion and the reaction. That space is where wisdom can emerge, the pause that empowers. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively in his journal, what we now know as Meditations, about this very process. He often reminded himself to pause, to observe his thoughts and feelings as if from a distance. One of his reflections reads, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you'll find strength." This pause is what gives us agency. It's the difference between shouting back during an argument and calmly stating your boundaries. It's what allows us to choose a better response, rather than simply reacting on impulse. It doesn't have to take long. Sometimes, just a few seconds of mindful breathing can break the automatic chain of reaction. In that brief stillness, we can ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? Is this feeling based on facts or just a fleeting impression? These questions may seem small, but they have enormous power to reshape our behavior. Emotions aren't enemies. The Stoics were often misunderstood as emotionless or cold, but that's a modern misinterpretation. In reality, they saw emotions as natural parts of the human experience. What they warned against was becoming a slave to them. There's nothing wrong with feeling angry when someone treats you unfairly, or anxious when facing a big decision. The key is not letting those emotions dictate your actions blindly. Seneca, another great Stoic thinker, wrote that emotions themselves are not dangerous. It's the unexamined and unchecked ones that lead to trouble. Like wild horses, emotions need guidance. If we don't take the reins, they'll run off in whatever direction they choose. By learning to recognize our emotional states, we become more like a skilled rider, aware and control, and less likely to be thrown off course. Journaling, a tool for emotional insight. One practical way to develop emotional awareness is through journaling. The Stoics were big believers in daily reflection. At the end of the day, take a few moments to ask yourself, what did I feel strongly today? What triggered those emotions? Did I respond in a way I'm proud of? You don't need to write a novel. Just a few honest sentences can help you start spotting patterns. Over time, you may notice that certain situations always provoke irritation, or that stress manifests as impatience in your interactions. With this self-awareness, you can begin to respond with more wisdom and compassion. both toward yourself and others. Clarity under pressure. Life rarely gives us ideal conditions. We're often called to act under pressure when emotions are running high. This is where Stoic practice truly shines. Imagine being in a tense meeting and someone criticizes your work unfairly. The emotional impulse might be to defend yourself instantly or shut down. But if you practice recognizing your emotions, you might notice a surge of anger or hurt and choose instead to breathe, assess, and respond calmly. This ability doesn't come overnight. It takes repeated practice, pausing, observing, and naming what's going on inside. But with time, you develop a kind of inner stillness that remains steady even when the world around you is chaotic. Choosing your response. The Stoics believe that we always have a choice in how we respond, no matter the circumstances. The goal isn't to become emotionless, but emotionally intelligent. It's to move from being ruled by emotions to being guided by reason. This doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. It means allowing them to inform you, not control you. Anger might point to an injustice that needs addressing. Fear might signal that something important is at stake. The difference is that now you get to decide what to do about it. Not your emotions. Your first Stoic habit. Recognizing your emotions is more than a technique. It's a habit, one that sits at the core of Stoic practice. It gives you a clearer lens through which to see the world, and more importantly, yourself. It's the gateway to better decisions, healthier relationships, and a calmer mind. So the next time you feel the stirrings of an emotional wave, pause. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? And what is this feeling trying to tell me? That small step is the beginning of something powerful. The freedom to choose your response and the clarity to live with intention. 2. Choose reason, not impulse. Have you ever slammed a door in frustration, fired off a heated text, or made a snap decision in the middle of an argument, only to regret it minutes later? That's the cost of acting on impulse. In the heat of the moment, we often allow emotions like anger, fear, or frustration to take control of our thoughts and actions. But what if we could press pause, take a breath, and make decisions from a place of calm instead of chaos? This is where Stoicism offers a powerful tool, the discipline of choosing reason over impulse. At the core of Stoic philosophy is the idea that our emotions are not inherently bad, but they must be examined and guided by reason. The Stoics did not suggest we become cold or unfeeling. On the contrary, they believe in understanding our emotions deeply. However, they taught that we should never let emotions dictate our behavior, without first checking them through the lens of reason. Imagine you're in a traffic jam, running late for an important meeting. Someone cuts you off without signaling. You feel the surge. Your heart races, your jaw tightens, and the impulse to honk the horn or shout out the window rushes forward. But in that split second, Stoicism invites you to ask, is this action going to help? Will I feel proud of this choice later? This brief pause is everything. It's in that moment, between the stimulus, the guy cutting you off, and your response, that freedom exists. The freedom to choose your reaction. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That reaction is your responsibility, and it's also your power. By choosing reason, we regain control. Let's be clear. Emotion itself isn't the enemy. It's the unchecked impulse that can lead to regret. When we act from a place of immediate emotion, without filtering it through rational thought, we often create problems that didn't exist before. A harsh word can wound a relationship. An impulsive purchase can hurt your finances. A quick decision made in anger can lead to long-term consequences. So, how do we begin to choose reason more consistently? First, practice awareness. Start paying attention to what triggers strong emotions in you. Is it criticism? Feeling ignored? Uncertainty? Becoming aware of your emotional patterns gives you a chance to catch yourself before you react. Next, cultivate the habit of pausing. This doesn't mean you ignore how you feel. It means you give yourself a few moments to reflect before acting. Ask yourself, am I thinking clearly right now? What would the best version of myself do? Will this decision serve me well in the long run? These questions act like a mental compass, guiding you back to clarity. Marcus Aurelius, another Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, wrote in his Meditations, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. In other words, your interpretation of an event is more important than the event itself. By changing how you view a situation, you can change how it affects you. Choosing reason also means accepting that we can't control everything. We can't control how others behave, what happens in the world, or even some aspects of our own circumstances. But we can control our response. That's where our strength lies. Let's go back to that stressful traffic jam. You've been cut off. Your heart is pounding. But instead of reacting impulsively, you take a deep breath. You remind yourself that getting angry won't get you to your meeting any faster. You don't know what's going on in the other driver's life. Maybe it was an emergency. You let it go. You just chosen reason. And in doing so, you preserved your peace. The more often you do this, the stronger your reason muscle becomes. Like any habit, it gets easier with practice. Over time, you'll find yourself reacting with more patience, making decisions with more clarity, and feeling more in control of your emotional world. Choosing reason over impulse isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. It's about recognizing that you do have a choice, even when emotions run high. And in that choice lies a deeper kind of freedom. So the next time you feel your emotions rising, when you're tempted to yell, to quit, to lash out, or to give in, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, would I make the same decision if I were calm? That one question could change everything. 3. The dichotomy of control. Do you stress about things you can't control? Most of us do. It's easy, almost natural, to get caught up in worrying about external circumstances, the behavior of others, the outcome of events, the ups and downs of the economy, or even the weather. We ruminate over the past and try to predict the future, often forgetting that so much of what we spend our time and energy on lies entirely outside our sphere of influence. But Stoicism offers a simple, powerful tool to cut through that mental clutter, the dichotomy of control. At its core, this principle teaches that life can be divided into two distinct categories, what we can control and what we cannot. According to Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, some things are in our control and others not. That simple truth is the bedrock of a Stoic mindset. It's a lens through which we can evaluate every experience, every worry, every plan, and every disappointment. So, what exactly is within our control? Stoicism makes it very clear. The only things truly under our control are our own thoughts, actions, intentions, and attitudes. In other words, our internal world, how we choose to respond to the things that happen to us. Everything else, our health, wealth, reputation, success, how others act, and even whether we wake up tomorrow, is outside of our control. This distinction is crucial, not only in philosophy but in daily life. Think about how much of your mental energy is spent on things that you wish you could change. But realistically, you can't. You can't control how someone else behaves. You can't force a specific outcome in every situation. You can't predict the future or erase the past. Yet we pour our emotions into these areas, often making ourselves miserable in the process. Letting go of what we cannot control isn't about giving up. It's not passivity or apathy. It's about acceptance. It's the acknowledgement that while we can't steer every storm, we can always steer our ship. When we recognize and accept that some things are simply out of our hands, we free ourselves from a huge source of suffering. Imagine being stuck in traffic. You can't control the cars ahead of you, the red lights, or the slow-moving lane, but you can control how you react. You can choose to rage and stew, or you can take a deep breath, listen to music, or practice patience. One choice will ruin your mood. The other will protect your peace. This isn't just a thought experiment. It has real, transformative power. People who practice this mindset report lower levels of anxiety, improve relationships, and greater clarity in decision-making. Why? Because when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you reclaim the energy you were wasting and redirect it toward actions that actually make a difference. Here's a practical approach to applying the dichotomy of control in your life. Pause and assess. When you start to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or frustrated, stop and ask yourself, is this within my control? If the answer is no, remind yourself that resisting reality only creates more suffering. Focus inward. Once you've identified what's outside your control, Shift your focus inward. What can you do in this moment to respond wisely, calmly, and ethically? Let go deliberately. It takes practice, but you can train yourself to release your grip on what you can't change. Write it down, say it out loud, or simply breathe through it. The goal is to loosen your emotional attachment to outcomes. Act with intention. Stoicism isn't about sitting on the sidelines. It's about showing up in life with clarity and courage. When you know what's in your hands, act with integrity and purpose. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you'll find strength." This is the essence of the dichotomy of control. When we accept the boundaries of what we can influence, we actually become more powerful, not less. Why? Because our energy is no longer scattered in all directions. It's focused, directed, potent. It's also worth noting that this principle extends beyond personal well-being. It's a foundation of resilience. In challenging times, people who internalize this dichotomy are less likely to crumble. They remain grounded because their sense of stability doesn't depend on external chaos. Their peace comes from within. Think of athletes who lose games, entrepreneurs who face rejection, or individuals who suffer loss. Those who bounce back do so not because life treated them kindly, but because they learn to focus on what they can still control: their attitude, their effort, their next move. In a world that often feels uncertain and fast-paced, the dichotomy of control is like an anchor. It reminds us that while we can't always choose our circumstances, we can always choose our response. And that, in the end, is what Stoicism is all about: not changing the world to suit our preferences, but changing ourselves to face the world as it is. So the next time you find yourself spiraling over something you can't change, take a moment. Ask the question, is this mine to control? If not, let it go. If yes, act wisely. This practice may seem small, but over time, it can reshape your life. Peace of mind isn't found in controlling everything. It's found in mastering the only thing that was ever yours to control: yourself. 4. Step back and see the bigger picture. What if you could view every stressful situation as though you were an outsider watching from a distance? Imagine yourself not as the central character caught in the whirlwind of emotions, but as a calm observer looking down at the scene with clarity and detachment. This powerful mental shift, stepping back and seeing the bigger picture, can be one of the most valuable tools for living a more rational, peaceful, and intentional life. In our daily lives, we are often consumed by the immediacy of events: a disagreement with a colleague, a mistake that embarrasses us, or a challenge that feels overwhelming can completely hijack our emotional state. In these moments, our reactions are quick, often impulsive, and rooted in fear, ego, or frustration. This emotional fog clouds our thinking, leading us to say or do things we later regret. But what if, instead, we paused for a moment and created mental space between ourselves and the situation? What if we learned to view our problems not as personal attacks or insurmountable disasters, but simply as events happening in the world? This is the essence of stepping back and seeing the bigger picture. It's about shifting perspective, replacing emotion-driven reactions with thoughtful, reasoned responses. When we look at a situation from a higher vantage point, we begin to understand that many of the things we worry about are not as significant as they seem. We see patterns, motivations, and outcomes more clearly. We recognize our own biases and emotional triggers. We remember that most setbacks are temporary, most conflicts are not about us personally, and most worries are exaggerated in the moment. One of the most effective ways to practice this mental distancing is through objective self-talk. This involves speaking to yourself as if you were advising a friend. Instead of saying, "I can't believe this is happening to me," you might say, "You're going through a tough moment, but it's manageable. What's the most constructive thing you can do right now?" This kind of self-dialogue helps to quiet the emotional noise and bring clarity. It breaks the spell of immediate reactivity and opens the door to calm, wise decision-making. The Stoic philosophers understood the value of this technique long before modern psychology gave it names like cognitive distancing or emotional regulation. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic thinker, often reminded himself in his journal, which we now know as meditations, to see things from above, literally. He imagined looking down at the earth from high in the sky, seeing people bustling about, each caught up in their concerns. From that view, no single problem seemed overwhelming or uniquely terrible. Everything was part of the larger flow of life. When you take this broader view, it becomes easier to put things in perspective. A rude comment from someone, likely a reflection of their mood or insecurities, not a reflection of your worth. A delayed goal or an unexpected failure. Perhaps a detour, not a dead end. The ability to zoom out and see things in context transforms your experience. It brings resilience, patience, and peace. Let's consider a practical example. Suppose you receive critical feedback at work, and your initial reaction is embarrassment or anger. Your instinct might be to defend yourself or shut down emotionally. But if you pause, breathe, and step back mentally, you can assess the situation differently. You might ask yourself, is this feedback accurate or useful in some way? Even if it wasn't delivered kindly, is there something I can learn from it? A year from now, will this moment even matter? This shift doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending not to care. It means giving yourself the space to respond wisely rather than react impulsively. There's another benefit to seeing the bigger picture. It fosters compassion for others and for yourself. When you understand that everyone is fighting their own battles, it's easier to be patient, forgiving, and kind. When you realize that you too are a work in progress, you become gentler with your own mistakes and shortcomings. This mindset reduces stress and builds emotional strength. It keeps you grounded even when life throws curveballs your way. Practicing this doesn't require hours of meditation or retreating into the mountains. It can happen in small, everyday moments. The next time you feel your heart race during a tense conversation or your chest tighten with anxiety over a problem, try this. Pause, take a deep breath, and imagine yourself stepping a few feet back. Picture the scene as if you were watching it unfold in a movie. What would the wise, calm character do in this moment? What advice would you give your best friend if they were in your shoes? That simple pause can change everything. Over time, this habit becomes a natural part of your thinking. Instead of being pulled into every emotional current, you become the observer who notices, reflects, and responds with intention. Life doesn't stop being challenging, but your way of dealing with it becomes stronger, clearer, and more grounded. In a world that encourages instant reactions and constant stimulation, choosing to step back and see the bigger picture is a radical act of self-mastery. It puts you in control of your inner world, no matter what's happening outside. And in that space between the event and your response lies your true power, the power to live deliberately with wisdom and peace. 5. Live by your values, not by your emotions. In moments of stress or uncertainty, the easiest thing to do is react. Whether it's snapping at someone in frustration, making a rash decision in anger, or retreating in fear, emotions can overwhelm us and hijack our behavior. Yet the Stoic path calls us to something higher, not to be unfeeling, but to be steady. Stoicism teaches that while emotions are natural, they should not rule us. What should guide us instead are our values, the principles we thought about carefully and chosen deliberately as the foundation of how we want to live. One of the key tenets of Stoicism is the belief that virtue is the highest good. The Stoics, like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, taught that external events are largely outside of our control, but our response to them is not. And that response should be shaped not by emotion, but by virtue. So, when faced with adversity, it's not about how we feel in the moment, but about what is right in the moment. To live by your values means knowing what those values are. Courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance are the 4 cardinal virtues for the Stoics. But these can take many forms in modern life: honesty, kindness, perseverance, discipline, fairness. Whatever you choose as your personal guiding principles, the important thing is to be clear about them and to return to them consistently, especially when life throws challenges your way. Consider a situation where someone insults you publicly. Your initial emotional reaction might be to retaliate, to shout back, or humiliate them in return. That's the emotional path. But the Stoic path asks you, what do your values say? If you value dignity, self-control, or kindness, then those principles ask you to pause, take a breath, and respond or not respond in a way that reflects your highest self, not your most reactive self. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." He reminds us that emotional reactions often stem from ego and illusion, not clarity. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying emotions. Stoicism is not about becoming robotic. Emotions are part of the human experience. But the key is mastery, not repression. You feel the anger, but you don't act out of it. You feel the fear, but you don't let it decide for you. You recognize the emotion, you acknowledge it, but then you choose your action based on reason and principle. The Stoics likened this to a skilled horseman riding a wild horse. The emotions may buck and surge, but the reins are in your hands. Living by your values also brings a deep sense of peace. When you know that you are acting in alignment with what you believe in, external chaos has less power over you. You're no longer tossed around by every opinion, insult, or difficulty. You don't need to please everyone or win every argument. Instead, you measure success by a much simpler standard. Did I act according to my values? That internal scorecard is much more reliable than external validation. This mindset also helps with decision-making. In times of confusion or pressure, when your emotions cloud your judgment, returning to your core values can cut through the fog. If honesty is your value, then even when it's difficult or risky, you speak the truth. If compassion is your value, you treat others with kindness even when they don't seem to deserve it. You're not acting based on how you feel right now, but on who you want to be consistently. Let's take another example. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The immediate feeling might be irritation or even rage. But if you value patience or calmness, you can recognize that your emotional response is temporary and probably unhelpful. Maybe the other driver is having a terrible day, or maybe they just made a mistake like we all do sometimes. By living from your values, you let the moment pass without letting it poison your peace. This shift from emotion to principle takes practice. It requires awareness, reflection, and intentionality. But over time, it becomes a habit. You begin to notice the space between stimulus and response. You learn to pause. You learn to ask, what would my best self do here? That question alone can transform how you show up in the world. Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This is the heart of living by your values. Life will bring frustrations, losses, betrayals, and all kinds of emotional triggers. But your values are your compass. They don't change based on circumstances. They're the steady ground beneath your feet when everything else is shifting. So when the world pushes, don't push back blindly. When emotions rise, don't let them take the wheel. Instead, return to your core, your chosen principles, your North Star. Let your values speak louder than your impulses. That is the Stoic way, not emotionless, but principled. Not indifferent, but intentional. And in a world that often rewards reaction, choosing response is a quiet revolution. Stoicism provides a powerful framework for managing emotions and thinking critically under stress. By practicing these principles regularly, you'll develop the resilience and clarity needed to make thoughtful decisions no matter how high the pressure gets. Remember, it's not the events that stress us out, it's how we respond to them. So, the next time life throws you a curveball, pause, reflect, and choose reason over emotion. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more insights into Stoicism and self-improvement. Stay calm, stay thoughtful, and embrace the Stoic way of living. Thanks for watching. Let's continue growing together, one principle at a time.